This is Mindset for Success with your host, Dr. Leslie Knudsen. Each week, she will interview women entrepreneurs to explore the unconscious psychological struggles they faced as they build their businesses and how they overcame them. Here's your host, Leslie Knudsen.
I'm so happy to welcome our next guest, Juliet Scott-Croxford. Juliet currently serves as CEO for media brand Worth, responsible for leading its transformation from a print magazine to a content platform that focuses on worth beyond wealth and inspires and informs an affluent, influential, and successful community of individuals to be their best. Juliet began her career as a management consultant, learning to code at IBM Business Consulting Services before focusing on strategy and organizational change and working with clients to solve complex business problems across a variety of sectors through the use of technology. After working as a consultant with Guardian News and Media on its print to digital strategy, in 2012, she confirmed in a permanent role to a lead strategy and operations for the Guardian Media Group's commercial division based in London. Juliet joined the Guardian's executive committee in 2015, and as a chief delivery officer, was responsible for the strategic implementation of the global 3-year turnaround and plan transformation and growth for the Guardian's U.S. operation, relocating to New York in 2016. She currently lives in Westchester with her husband and son, is a keen runner, yogi, and skier. Welcome, Juliet.
Thank you, Leslie. It's great to be here with you today.
Could you share with our listeners a bit about your colorful background, fabulous accent, and growing up in the UK, and then your move to the US for work 5 years ago?
Yeah, of course. So I was born in the UK, despite my grandfather actually being an American. So even though I was born and raised in the UK, I actually ended up spending a lot of time in the US as a child before moving here 5 years ago. The start of my career really focused on what was termed a managing consultant, which I really learned about when I was at university. And I was attracted to the profession because it felt like it would offer me variety. And I think at that point in my life, I wasn't quite sure. I certainly didn't want to kind of pin myself to something. Mm-hmm. And I liked the idea of being able to work across industry and across sector and across different clients and just to sort of get a deep understanding of their problems quickly and help them solve for those. So my career started at IBM. I was a technology consultant initially, which actually started me off in terms of learning to code and being a developer. I quite quickly realized what I really enjoyed much more was the impact, understanding the impact that technology was having on people and processes and companies and businesses and industries. So I moved into what was their organizational change and digital transformation practice. From there, I worked across a number of different industries. And then prior to the financial crisis in 2008, I sort of had recognized the media and entertainment space being just a very interesting industry to get involved with. It was being disrupted pretty fairly early on with the impact on digital. So I worked for a number of clients in the media and entertainment space, then joined a boutique consultancy. And if I'm honest, I joined them because they had just won their first project with a media client, which was The Guardian. And that was a brand that I had grown up with. And it was very culturally relevant in the UK. And I adored the brand. So I joined them on the understanding that I would go on that project to oversee their digital transformation and set up what at the time was their sort of digital development team and approach, and introduce the sort of notion of more agile ways of working and product development. And then a year in, I went client side and joined them permanently to oversee the sort of strategy and operational parts of their business on the commercial side. So all of the sort of revenue elements of it, including marketing and audience insight. And then fast forward to 2015, I was appointed to the executive team as Chief Delivery Officer, which I think you highlighted in the introduction. And at that point, the Guardian, the brand, was in crisis. So it was a pretty intense time to be there, but it was also an incredibly rewarding time. And it was a very sort of involved project in terms of really sort of thinking about how we take the business back to break even, and really think about how the business is going to be a sustainable business in the future, and what revenue streams will drive that, and how we need to kind of really rethink the culture and ways of working, and cost base to support that. So I was overseeing the implementation of that 3-year turnaround plan, and that was what took me to New York in 2016 to oversee the turnaround of the Guardian's US business, and I've stayed ever since.
So I know now that you're working at Worth, which is, of course, a U.S. company. I wondered if there was some risk deciding to stay in the U.S., whether or not you feel like you maybe didn't fit in or it didn't bother you. And if so, what sorts of things did you do to overcome these issues?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think at the time I weighed up the risk of us staying. I was certainly, as a family, and certainly with my husband, I was certainly the driver of wanting to come here. And actually now he's more sort of, actually he can't imagine going back right now. So I was definitely the driver, and I think it was driven from both my experience as a kid and my sort of relationship with my grandfather and my father. As well as I had traveled a lot on business to New York, and I just loved the energy of it and the frenetic energy of it. And I found that quite addictive. So I think it got under my skin, and I sort of got it in my head, and I sort of put my mind to it that actually, yeah, we would come here. And when we did move over, I was 3 months pregnant. So we ended up having our son was born in Manhattan. So really he's known no different. And we've obviously since moved out to Westchester, and we're actually expecting another one. So I think at the time I didn't really weigh up the risk. I saw it as a real opportunity. There, of course, are times throughout the last 5 years where, you sometimes question, is this the right thing to do? Sure. But actually, the decision to join Worth was one where I'd sort of recognized, whilst I'd worked in the US through The Guardian, I hadn't really been exposed to the US market in a way that I felt the Worth opportunity would expose me to. So really for the opportunity with Worth, it's a private equity company owned by a single investor, my chair, Jim McCann, and I saw it as an opportunity to really build my network and relationships in the US market and also in New York, and it's afforded me to do that, which has been great.
And I also guess, thanks to your grandfather being American and to you having traveled a lot, I think you said also as a kid and for work, being globally minded and diversity is something that's really important to you and you're passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, also my grandfather was a Texan, so it's very
globally minded.
It's very, as you know, it's quite a it is a sort of, every state is so different as well. But I do think it's important to be globally minded, and I think when you really experience living in another country, I did when I was a teenager, or I think just in my early 20s, I actually lived in Italy for a bit and did a ski season, and it does give you a different perspective. And I think that's really valuable in connecting and empathizing with different cultures and sort of expanding your mind beyond, the country that you know and you love and you've been brought up in. So I do think it's been great for that. And I also think it's great for your relationship as well, to kind of experience sort of living overseas and getting used to that. And then certainly from a diversity and equality and inclusion point of view, it's absolutely something that I've been driven by, and particularly over the last 3 years at Worth, we have quite a significant community and platform focused on what we call Women in Worth. And that's all focused on how do you accelerate and activate progress for women and minorities amid the challenges that we still face, whether it's access to the board, access to capital, access to funding, etc.
For sure.
And you just have to sort of look at this, the impact, I mean, on women and particularly working mums over the last 12 months has been devastating. So I think if anything, it's sort of highlighted that to me even further, and the importance of helping us drive for a more inclusive, equal economy and society for the benefit of everyone, really.
You shared with me earlier that you had a really difficult time in your first year of a university, which kind of created this moment for you to have some self-doubt and then kind of pivot and do something else. Would you talk a little bit about that experience and how did you successfully move forward from this?
Yeah, it's interesting. It was actually my first year at what we call sixth form college. So it was just after high school, and it was before I went to university. I studied business and management at Oxford Brookes. But I think it was the first time that I had tried at something and failed. And it really sort of impacted me. And I think it caught me by surprise because I felt like through my high school years, I was pretty popular and I kind of, I was never like the brainiest but I always kind of did well, but with relatively little effort. And it was when I was in my first year at sixth form college that I actually ended up taking my exams and failed them. And I was sort of taken aback by, but also it sort of suddenly dawned on me that I had to figure this out, and no one was going to figure it out for me. So I kind of did quite a bit of soul searching and realized actually what I'd chosen to study wasn't the right thing, and actually where I'd chosen to study was the wrong place. So I ended up then deciding actually, and probably driven a bit by my father and the fact that he was sort of very business minded, and also my brother had done a sort of business management course. I ended up thinking I would do that plus Spanish because I loved languages and I'd done quite a lot of traveling. So I realized actually I was studying the wrong thing. And then I re-enrolled in a different college. And it wasn't until I'd done those two things, I then told my parents, because for some reason I was like, okay, I've got to figure this out. And then I can kind of say, look, I haven't done very well this year, but I have sorted it out and this is what I'm now going to do. And it was interesting. I think that whole experience then shocked me into realizing I want to do really well. And it sort of gave me a different kind of drive in terms of, I did want to get really good grades and I did want to be the best in the class. And it definitely sort of switched something in my head, that experience, which at the time I remember feeling quite panicked by it. But I think it was probably quite a key moment in my life, really, and how it's sort of driven me forward.
And does it sort of define how you see fear of failure today in some ways?
I think I've got more comfortable with it. And I think just because of the job that I'm in and the industry I'm in, it's so fast paced and it's continuously being disrupted, and change is inevitable. So I think in order, and particularly this role at Worth, where actually it's a turnaround, and it was a turnaround, I think I've sort of almost trained myself to get in that headspace of actually experimenting, learning is a good thing. And I know it's a cliche to sort of say fail fast, but I think if you get into that headspace of let's try things out and let's see what happens and what the results are, and if we like them, let's carry on, or does it open a new opportunity, or if it doesn't, we stop doing it. But I think it's important to be in that mindset. Otherwise, I think you're in danger of sort of